in times like this with a presentation, we want to hear the presenter as well. So again, my name is Greg Astley. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. I want to thank you for joining us today. We know that everybody's anxious to get started on the reopening, or if you are already in that phase, as our presentation says, getting ready for the recovery and how we can do that. And so I am very pleased to introduce Tammy Gillis. Tammy is the CEO and founder of Gillis Sales, and she's got over 25 years in hospitalities sales. Her company, when she launched it, is designed around consulting training and a sales for hire program for service-focused hotels who operate without a sales team. She's personally trained thousands of sales professionals, hotel owners, general managers, and frontline associates, so a wide range of positions and responsibilities. And I know that Tammy believes that sales is the lifeblood for all organizations. And so for her, her mission is to make the sales accessible and achievable for all hotel owners. With that, I'm very pleased to turn it over to Tammy Gillis with Gillis Sales.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Lori and Orla. And good morning. Good morning to everybody. I know your time is so valuable, and we're thrilled to see such a great turnout over a really important topic, getting ready for the recovery. And we're all looking forward to what that looks like, knowing that there's still so much uncertainty around that non-essential travel in phase 2 in terms of when that's going to happen. The message here is that there's still things we can be doing now to get ready for when those businesses and when your county and when the state does start to open up. And we've been getting asked a lot, particularly over the last several weeks. Should we really be focused on sales? It sounds counterintuitive right now, and certainly your occupancies are not reflecting a lot of sales. So it might sound counterintuitive to be focusing on sales, but I want to share with you a metaphor as to why it's important to start thinking about the recovery and the ramp up now. If you think about this very competitive sport of auto racing, think of that as our hotel industry post-COVID. All of those cars in a race are at that start line, and they want to get ahead of their competitors. They want to be first out of the gate and get great momentum and be able to accelerate ahead of their competitors. And that's where we're going to find ourselves. All of you, along with your competitors, are going to be at that starting line. And you don't want to wait until everything is completely certain. We start seeing signs of life across every single segment. Because if your competitor is more aggressive, they're going to get out ahead of you. So what I'm sharing with you over the next 30 minutes is what we're seeing across North America. We do have hotels that we support in your state, and we are seeing some signs of life. It is gradual, it is slow, but the experience and the best practices we're going to share today, it's from the hundreds of calls we're making a day on behalf of the hotels that we support. So I want to start with some fundamentals, and knowing that some of you may be working with very lean operations right now, and perhaps before COVID, you were operating without a sales team. Whether you have a sales team or not, somebody has to be responsible for the sales strategy. And hopefully you can develop a sales culture and be able to delegate some of this. This strategy and the best practices are regardless of whether you have a full service team or not. And it just means you might have less time to do it. So I don't want to overwhelm you with all of these best practices. Just write down what will resonate the most, what you think in the next 30 days will get you the highest value. And then you just might have to chip away a little slower if you don't have a full team to support you. But to kick off, we really have to go back to the basics. So developing a sales strategy. If you were to flash back pre-COVID, I want you to think about the market segments you were getting business from. So we call those demand generators. So depending on the area of the state that you are in, were you seeing a lot of that white collar corporate transient business? Were you seeing more of that blue collar, gray collar construction? A lot of you, were a leisure destination, or maybe sports or community associations or conventions, or government. There's lots of other market segments. So pre-COVID, what were those demand generators? Where were you getting business from? And as you look at the other side of this recovery, which of those market segments are going to be coming back first? I'll give you my opinion on which ones we're seeing from our experience, but here's where the opportunity is. Perhaps before COVID, you were in a market where you didn't have to hunt for a lot of business, and I'll talk more about hunting later. And there could have been some market segments you just really weren't going after because you didn't need the business. As you're going through this assessment, you also want to identify that. Not only what business were you getting before COVID, what business weren't you getting that your competitors were, that you might be a little bit more interested in now to help you ramp up your occupancy. So that's really, really critical. The name of the game going forward, and particularly for the next 6 months, and there's a lot of uncertainty around the size of groups in 2021, it's going to be local, and the battleground is going to be to own your local market from a sales perspective. And I've been using the term scrappy a lot, and it's a great way to describe what's going to be required to really get out ahead of your competitors. So first of all, think about, reflect on those demand generators. What were you doing well? What segments might you want to revisit and re-engage? And then the next step is, I want you to reflect on what was your mindset and your execution around sales before COVID. I've had a number of calls over the last several weeks, 2 of them this morning, and one client said, they're in a tier 1 big market where they had a ton of concerts, ton of sporting events, ton of entertainment, and all of that, as we know, has come to a grinding halt. So they said, we were guilty of farming, right? That wasn't their terminology, but that's the label I put on it. We were enjoying those incoming inquiries and what came to us. So that's managing incoming leads. But what they weren't doing, which is understandable because they had the business coming to them, they didn't have to look at some lower rated market segments. They really didn't have to, because they were getting really good business from other segments. So now they're considering going after these segments to hunt for that business. And so that is where the mindset shift will have to change post-COVID. If you were a hotel that was, not sitting back waiting for the phone to ring, but maybe enjoying a lot of incoming inquiries through your brand channels, or the phone was ringing, or referrals, great position to be in. And that's an important strategy, and you want to make sure that's managed properly. That is not going to get you there going forward, that alone. You need to be looking at proactive prospecting, casting a virtual net in your backyard and saying, what business is going to help me Sunday to Thursday to ramp up my occupancy? And then on the weekends, we're talking about, Greg and I and Lori were talking about just before this call, that staycation. So what am I doing this summer to try to attract those leisure travelers looking to get away? So farming versus hunting is how you are going to ramp up your occupancy. And they require a different mindset and also a different skill set. So I really encourage you to also reflect on what is that mindset and skill set of your team. So you might think, where do I begin? I'm overwhelmed with operations. I'm running on a very lean staffing level. Where do I start to look for these leads to start hunting? And we know there's no shortage of leads to go after. So let me give you my perspective on this. It's usually we don't have the time. It's not that you have to go buy mailing lists and spend a ton of money on all of these tools and these marketing tools. Usually have it under, there's lots of data with your brand reports, what's in your PMS, what are some lost clients, there's, what are you doing on Google? And I'll give you some of those recommendations. But as you look to ramp up your occupancy, essential services is what's been keeping the doors open on a lot of hotels right now, right? So it's medical, it's first responders, it's government, it's transportation. And another segment that has been an essential service that we are seeing our hotels go from 10% occupancy to 20 to 30 to even 40. It's this segment right here. Some of you might be getting some of this business. When I talk about workforce, it's rail, So it's all the transportation companies, it's sanitization companies, it could be construction. There's all kinds of blue collar, gray collar essential services that are out there traveling. And so my recommendation is to reach out to those third-party companies in these segments. Now, all of you, I'm sure, have heard of CLC, corporate lodging. They are the Walmart of the cruise segment. It's hard to ignore them. A lot of you pre-COVID, and for good reasons, didn't want to work with CLC because it's very low rated business, and perhaps you had higher rated business that you didn't need to work with them. They have both Travel Alliance and CLC. They're competitors, by the way. Travel Alliance is smaller. They have different programs. So I recommend that you reach out to both to figure out how many room nights in your market. Both companies have actually released a COVID release contract, if you will. So for hotels that said, listen, I'm willing to work with you right now to help ramp up my occupancy, but it's temporary. I'm not giving you this rate forever. They came out to do that. So reach out to directly to your CLC or Travel Alliance person, or your brand person, your area director, your FPC, whomever it is at the brand that's helping you on the franchise support side. If you're an independent hotel, then you'll have to reach out to CLC and Travel Alliance directly. If you want more of this business, here's another way to get it. Bid Clerk. So Bid Clerk is a subscription fee. We leverage it for all the hotels we support, and it tells you all upcoming construction projects 90 to 100 days. There's still projects happening, are delayed. And again, this might not help you next week, next month, but it's helping you build a medium and long-term pipeline of business to try to help ramp up your occupancy. Parking lot checks. You might think this is really old school, and depending on where your hotel is, you may or may not have access to be able to drive around and check parking lots. But this is really important because it's going to tell you the workforce people that are staying at your comp set that you can start going after. And it's also going to tell you who's starting to come back. We have never experienced anything like this before, and we're all trying to figure out who's traveling on the essential services side. And as your state and as your counties start to open up, this will be even more critical, because as that non-essential travel comes back, whether it's corporate or crew or leisure, we need to follow the breadcrumbs. Following the breadcrumbs and being scrappy is what is going to help you ramp up your occupancy. And sadly, but realistically, we are all fighting as hard for 5 to 10 rooms like we did before COVID for 50 or 100 rooms. And that is the name of the game, right? We've got hotels we're working with who were ecstatic because they hit 35% occupancy this week. I mean, imagine a time we would ever be satisfied with that. So let's be scrappy, let's hunt for the business, and let's follow the breadcrumbs. That is how you will outperform your comp set. And it really is one room night at a time. So that's the workforce segment that may apply to some of you more than others. Corporate travel. In your state, there are a lot of head offices, a lot of big employers. So depending on where your hotel is, the flip side of that, if these corporate companies are not an essential service, this segment, at least the big, the Nikes of the world, and we'll see what that looks like in terms of their corporate travel. But the big, what I call white collar corporate, might be a brand account that you're working with your brand and it's an RFP. There's a lot of talk that that's probably going to be one of the last segments to return with those large groups. A lot of these big companies have issued work from home orders until the end of the year. And I don't think any of these big companies are going to be jumping on airplanes anytime soon. So if you're in a driving distance, those hotels to those companies, you will probably recover faster. That's why local is so important. So here are some recommendations for those of you that subscribe to Agency 360 / TravelClick / Amadeus. They were purchased by Amadeus about a year ago. It's an expensive report. You might get it from your brand. If you have access to it, the one report, because there's no shortage of data and you don't have a lot of time. The next 13 weeks report is telling you every travel agency in the next 13 weeks that has booked a room in your comp set and at your hotel. It's going to tell you the company name, the address, the average rate, the revenue. The reason we are relying so heavily on this report is, again, it's showing the signs of life. Who are those companies that are starting to come back? Now, for some of your bigger companies that may be not traveling until the fall or traveling until 2021, I'm really recommending that you have a strategy to reconnect and requalify, because I assure you your competition will be equally as motivated to try to steal what you have worked so hard for. And that might mean, 3 calls a day and just reaching out and saying, first of all, how are you? But use it as a time to requalify and discover where they're at. So you might ask some questions like, tell me how this has impacted you in your role. Tell me how you think this is going to impact your travel program moving forward. And what do you think your travelers are going to care about in the future when staying at a hotel that we need to make sure we get right? So when you're making these calls, reach out with care for sure, and show who you are when they're not giving you any business, but also use it as an opportunity to ask some really thoughtful questions. So you're putting the pieces together of this big puzzle that we're looking at for the first time. And stay curious, and the more pieces you're able to chase and get a hold of before the competition, that's going to get you out ahead. Now, some really interesting stuff has evolved around the business. So business cases, depending on the brand you're with, if you're with a brand, business cases, some of them were due end of March, some were due end of May, some are ongoing. But there's been a big push for these big accounts to roll over, for the hotel industry and these big accounts and these travel managers to roll over the RFP, to basically bypass the RFP process for this year, and for 2020 rates to roll over into 2021. So if you're already in the program, great news. You just want to make sure that you're getting your fair share and that you're trying to capture as much of that business. If you're not in the program, then that's interesting. You want to reach out to your brand and just say, what does that mean for me if we're bypassing the RFP process? And not all companies have agreed to that yet, but that is what we're slowly starting to see from organizations like GBTA, and certain brands have come out to release a statement on what might be happening. So stay close to this. This is a segment that's coming back later, but you still want to nurture it and you still want to keep it warm. So we talked about essential services and workforce and corporate and rebooking canceled groups. Here's what is really surprising that we've seen the last couple of weeks. There's 2 really big surprises as we're all trying to figure out who's traveling. And it may not be applicable in your state, given the phase that you're at in terms of reopening. But these are future groups. We are rebooking canceled small groups. We're seeing baseball and soccer tournaments in the summer. We're seeing a number of wedding groups that have rebooked for the summer and the fall. And again, smaller groups, because every county, every area is going to have their own social distancing. Check your hotel planner. Make sure that your pictures, your hotel description, make sure the radius that you want to capture leads from is set accordingly. And of course, make sure that all of those channels, you've got the right content, you've got the right pictures to really represent your hotel for people shopping online. And for all of those small to medium-sized groups that canceled, keep them warm and reach out and make sure that you're having conversations with them so the competition doesn't sneak up behind you. I want to mention something that has come up very recently that we've noticed as well. And I'd be interested in hearing if you're seeing it across your hotels. There's been an increase in OTA reservations. So Expedia.com, Booking.com, and because of low occupancy, hotels are working with some of these opaque sites again, like Priceline and Booking.com, Priceline and Hotwire. here's why this is important. We really need to make sure we're training our front desk. And this is something Night Audit can help you with as well. Review your arrivals report and leave notes on those reservations. We need to find out those companies that are traveling and booking those OTAs. It's another piece of the puzzle. Is it a corporation that maybe is an essential service that you have a rate with, that you can establish a direct rate and they're not booking on the OTA next time? So you definitely want to have a strategy. We're seeing an increase in OTA business, and there's a few reasons why. One, and I'll give you an example. We had a client, one of the hotels that we support, we followed up with this OTA reservation to find out it was 3M. It was a 3M employee. That's an essential service. They've been making masks, and we asked him, why didn't you book your 3M rate? We have we're a preferred hotel. We've got well, they're finding lower rates on the OTAs. So there are consequences. I know we need the business, but you want to make sure you have rate parity. You protect your key accounts, the rates that you have with those key accounts, and that you have some rate parity across all your channels. Because the behavior that we're encouraging our clients to do is to book online. And those are really expensive channels to try to get your base business. So just an observation, review your arrivals reports, and then make sure you have a really good conversion strategy when that guest checks in to find out what company they're with and how you can get more of their business. So that's just, a few really good practices, stage by stage, small bite by small bite, how you can start ramping up your occupancy. And again, these are some of the lead sources that I referred to, right? You've got bid clerk, parking lot, the OTAs, lead ferret and Zoom. We use it. It's expensive. Again, you're probably not looking at spending a lot of marketing dollars. If it's something you want to use later, I promise you probably have enough data under your roof at your hotel with existing clients and brand reports. You don't have to be spending a lot of money on any mailing lists. And so the last piece before we open it up for any questions is, even before COVID, we were talking about this, that sales is an inside job. You could have 5 salespeople on your team out there hunting for business, but if you don't have a sales culture inside to protect that business and to really live your brand experience, then you're not firing on all cylinders. And so again, this is a great time for all of us to be reflecting on what were we doing really well before COVID from a sales and a service perspective, and what were some gaps that we really needed to tighten up, but we were too busy and we couldn't get to it. And one of the things in our experience we see a lot is that front desk, for example, are they more transactional? They're checking people in and out, or do they really understand their important role in qualifying a guest, asking the right questions, closing the sale? That is going to be how customers are won and lost moving forward. And I want to share this visual with you. You will have access to these slides after. Feel free to revisit it, share it with your team. But this whole everybody sells recommendation, think of it pre-COVID from a customer's perspective. The customer is at the center of all of the interactions. What did that look like when they were in the breakfast room, or when they came into contact with your sales department or front desk, or what I like to call the heart of the house, the maintenance and housekeeping? Where were you excelling? Where were you really outperforming in terms of your comp set? But where were you getting caught, right? If you're looking at Medallia or TripAdvisor, or even internally your observation, where were you leaking money? We have an extraordinary time to bridge those gaps, focus on training, and come back even more elevated. A lot of brands have been pushing out and communicating the last few weeks their commitment to clean, for example. That's Choices program, commitment to clean. Every brand has their own branded program, and it can't stop at a press release, right? What are we going to do as hoteliers to make sure that the frontline staff, back of the house, needs to know what that means, because they're executing it, there's no question. But when clients are calling, here's what they're going to care about moving forward. How am I safe? Tell me about your cleaning practices, and how are you taking care of me? We're all going to be a little nervous and apprehensive traveling. So as you're looking at bringing back staff that were furloughed, treat it like a grand reopening, because it is in many ways, whether you closed or not. We're reopening the state, you're reopening the country for business. How are you going to prepare your front line and back of the house to be excited, to be passionate, and taking care of those customer needs? Because it's going to be service is where customers are going to be won or lost. So really make sure you're developing those standard operating procedures, making sure you're developing scripts. The next couple of slides, I have some specific tactics, because I think front desk and night audit are two roles, two areas of the hotel that are underutilized. And when you're busy, it looks more transactional. But if you're building a sales culture and you're working with a lean staff, you really want to be able to get out of the weeds and build an army of salespeople looking out on, on behalf of everybody. And so can you start delegating, right? If you only have 10 rooms checking in tonight, what can you delegate to front desk? Can they be reviewing that arrivals report, jumping on LinkedIn, jumping on Google? Guess what? We have this OTA, but I looked up this person's name. They work for this company, which, by the way, we have a corporate rate for. We all need to be working together to connect the dots. And then proper tracking. One thing, if you don't have it, that will absolutely help you with your closed ratio, is making sure that you have an incoming inquiries form at the front desk. So you want to guide your staff in terms of the best practice on how to manage an incoming reservation, what questions to ask, how to handle it, and even some product knowledge and possible objections and how to overcome it. The more variables we introduce, the less consistent the customer experience is going to be. So remove as many variables, put those standard operating procedures in place, train your people on it, go in and coach, get out of the weeds, go back in and observe. And that's how you really build a sales focused culture. And I'm recommending that everybody sit down and rewrite and rethink about your value proposition for the reasons I just talked about. It's going to be care, cleanliness, and service. And don't leave it up to everybody's imagination to figure out what that means. Take your brand standards, write some scripts, and role play it with your team to get them ready. Now is the time. Now's the time to innovate. Now is the time to get really excited about how we're going to outperform the competition. And if you love to sell and if you love to win, this is how you do it. And there hasn't been a lot of hope, right? There's been a lot of despair. There's been a lot of concern, but travel will slowly start to return. And we have more control over what this looks like in terms of how we show up. There's a lot we don't have control over, but what I'm recommending, this can bring you some hope and you will absolutely see some results. So night audit, this is something that they can be helping you build out, prospecting lists from those parking lot checks, checking those OTA reservations, looking for leads, setting up Google alerts. By the way, if you don't know Google alerts, you go to google.com/Google alerts, and I would set up a Google alert for all of the major companies and clients in your backyard, your competitors, and that if they're mentioned at any time in the news, that notification is pushed to you. So as companies start to travel, as companies start to reopen, that's a really great sales tool. But again, don't take it all on your shoulders, right? Is that something that, okay, here are all the Google alerts I received night audit. I want you to research these 5 companies for me, because when I come in tomorrow morning, I'm ready to call them. So it really is this team effort. As we wrap up, I want to share with you, we do have some free sales resources over COVID. Because we make hundreds of calls a day, there are leads we come across that we don't have a home for because we're not selling in every single market. And so we've developed an online sales community. It's self-serve, it's free for 60 days, and there's a few key areas. So we do support Canada and the United States. So you'll click on once a week, if we have a lead in a certain market, we're uploading that lead. Now, if it's a hot lead for a crew checking in this Sunday, we're calling a hotel directly. So it's not those kind of leads. I want to manage your expectations. And we are doing that every day. It could be, we're calling for one hotel in a market and they're saying, hey, by the way, I also travel to Portland and I may have some, so that's the kind of information that we're posting. And it's free. So there's no guarantee that there'll be a lead for your market. As we uncover leads, that's what we're doing. A couple of other pieces to the sales playbook or the sales community is this playbook. It's a guide. So some of the things I talked about, I am facilitating. It's a little bit of an audio book, if you will, and I'm walking you through how to build a sales culture, but also some of you might be afraid to pick up the phone. Some of you may have a sales background, some of you don't. So this is going to teach you enough to be dangerous. How's that? Enough to be comfortable to pick up the phone and actually execute a sales call. There's also a sales forum. You can enter and ask any questions, and our leadership team, including myself, we're getting back to clients same day. So on that note, my hope is not to overwhelm you. Sales is one of many things that you're worried about right now as you look to open up your hotel for business. So whatever resonated most, what are the top 3 things that resonated based on your market and where your hotel is at that you can do for the next 30 days? And when you check that off, what are the next 3 things you can do? And it's not about trying to chase 27 different things and not execute on any of them. You don't have the time, you don't have the resources. And so my hope for all of you is that you're going to have a great leisure summer season, maybe a lot of staycations, and that some of these tips that I shared might help you ramp up and get ready for the recovery. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to Lori and to Greg to see if there's any questions. Don't hesitate to ask me anything, sales related, of course, in how I can help you. Lori, over to you.
Thank you, Tammy. We really appreciate all the information you shared with us today. I think that was very informative. I also appreciate you putting up your contact information there. And like we said earlier, the recording of this will be available with the slide deck. So if anybody would like that, let us know. Just checking the chat right now. There's a comment there which from Al Munguia. Thank you. He says, I would include working with DMOs, the local, regional, and state, as they also are working on bringing business back. Also, some will have resources, financial and otherwise, to help magnify your voice and product. So thank you.
That's a great point. Absolutely. What partners are in your community that can act as extensions of your sales team, also looking to bring travelers into the state or into your region? That's a great point.
All right, another one. I would love the recording. Thanks so much. I will send that to you. Annabelle, thank you. Any other questions for Tammy or Greg? If you have any questions for Greg, he's willing to pitch a few as well.
And we also have a part 2 coming up, right, Lori? So we've got a part 2 coming up. So for those of you that want to join the part 2 in the coming.
Yes, check our calendar on OregonRLA.org. I will be getting that up this afternoon with a new link. And Tammy, is that so that's a part 2. What more are you going to be exploring in this topic?
Yeah, so we'll go a little deeper, and we'll have some refreshers because some people might be joining that didn't join today. And so we're going to be going a little deeper on some of those sales tactics versus, at a high level, I covered a lot of stuff today. So we'll be going a little deeper in terms of how you can start executing at the hotel level on some of these training for the front desk and some tips on actually how to prospect and how to pick up the phone and start making some of those calls.
Great. Good to hear.
So Tammy, in another life, I did outside sales as well. And I was intrigued by your farming and hunting concept. We used to talk about hunters versus gatherers. That
gatherers.
Outside sales are the hunters. right? They like to make the kill. They like to get the close. The gatherers were more of your inside salespeople who, once you were able to bring a client in, they were really good at managing them. They did the maintenance work, the phone calls, the attention kind of thing. And so I'm wondering, when you talk about farming versus hunting and you're going after that business, is there also a personality type, or are there characteristics that are going to be more successful if you're hunting for that business as opposed to the farming that may have been done?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. And here's the thing, sometimes we put salespeople in the wrong seat and we hire a salesperson. And listen, that gathering or farming is a really important role. They're catching all the incoming leads, they're taking care of customers, it's turning into repeat business. And I'm not undermining that in any way. The problem is the phone's not ringing a whole lot right now. And we don't have a lot of those leads coming. The problem, and I see it a lot, is if you're hiring a salesperson, you're expecting them to do both, or you don't know the difference between both. There are some people that will never be a hunter. There are some people, and here's the difference. When someone calls the hotel and they're interested, that's a very different skill set to walk them through the process and why the hotel's so great, versus making an outbound call to someone who doesn't know you, doesn't want to hear from a salesperson, might not have what you need. That is a very different skill set and mindset, and it's not cut out for everybody. I've never been a gatherer. I love relationships. Relationships are really, really important. But I've been more that business development, front end hunting, and that's where I get my energy. The challenge that hotels fall into is they think it's all the same, and they'll hire salespeople and say, I couldn't get them to leave the office. It's because they were really good gatherers and you didn't hire a hunter, and there is a difference. So that's a really great question.
Thanks.
And I love hearing about your previous sales life. That's great. Well, thank you both for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to part 2. So think about any questions you might have, and look forward to seeing you again.
Great. Thank you very much, Tammy.
Yes,
Thanks, everyone.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.